Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a partial restoration of this little Penn Line D2 switcher. So this thing is this is a little Midget diesel switcher made by Penn Line. It is the D2 model. Penn Line made two variants of this. They made the D1 and the D2. The D1 look exactly like this, except the only difference is instead of a door here, the back of the motor would simply be exposed, sort of like that. And obviously that didn't look too good, and so they modified it and made the D2, which is this, with a concealed cab, sort of, at least where the motor isn't just exposed outright. So I think it's a little better, slightly better model. And yeah, so this is, as I said, a D2. There's a D1. These are kind of low-end, entry-level sort of kits that were made by Penn Line, which was later bought by Bowser. This thing is fully die-cast with brass wheels. So a very solid engine. I believe all the gears are brass. I think the bottom helical gear here might be plastic, but yeah. Today we're going to just do a simple partial restoration. I'm not going to go all out on this engine. I'm not going to be, ideally one day I want to completely remotor and just change the mechanism to make it run a lot better. But today and also paint it and whatnot. But today we're just going to simply remove all the grease and make this thing basically run again. I'm also going to be stripping the paint, which should be really quick and easy. But I'm not going to bother repainting it for now. I'm just going to, the end result basically is to get an unpainted, well-running engine, although noisy, and just still use the stock mechanism. Now, the reason why I want to swap the mechanism eventually is because this engine, although it has really nice helical gears, this thing still is very noisy. Right now it's not running at all, but even when fully restored, I expect it to run really noisily. Now, the reason behind this is, one major factor for gear noise is how fast the gears are spinning. So, in fact, that is the one reason why you always see the worm gear directly attached to the motor. Because the worm to worm gear transition dramatically drops the speed of the gears, right? And having the worm gear being placed right as the power comes out of the motor is the most efficient, because that basically drops the speed, the gear speed down significantly, and then you have regular gears like this transitioning the power further down, further slowing down the gear ratio with gear ratios and stuff. But in this case, we have straight on gears, and then this gear goes to an axle that goes horizontally across here with worm gears, and then the worm gears further slow down the speed and go into these worm gears. I guess I should rephrase that. So helical gears to a horizontal axle that goes across here with two worms, and then these are the worm gears that attach to the worm. The problem with this design is, although it is very compact, the issue is because the gear reduction, the worm gear reduction is later in the mechanism, it means that these two gears spin really quickly because you're getting the full revolution, speed of the motor. And because these are spinning really fast, even the best gears at high speeds will make a lot of noise, and that's the reason why this engine tends to make a lot more noise. And that's the reason why, again, that's the reason why worms and worm gears are usually attached toward the beginning of the power, the power path, I guess you should say. They're usually attached directly to the motor or somewhere around there. So yeah, anyways, this thing, from reports, it does run very smoothly, but just very noisily. But right now it's completely caked. So I want to show you what the condition of this engine is currently. The paint is just a mess. It's disgusting. It's scratched up. It's just no good. It's completely unsavable. There's a dummy coupler in the front here and a weird European style coupler in the rear. I realize my phone camera is kind of messing around with the white balance. It's making the background look green and also really orange sometimes. Anyways, that was a car going by. So in the back here, this pilot is completely bent, as you can see. That is no good. And then overall, just the mechanism is just caked on with grease. As you can see, it is absolutely filthy in here. I see hair, I see dust, and it's just all around just a disgusting part. And obviously this thing does not run. You can see a nice little hair right there. Beautiful. But yeah, so this thing is, and also the brass is really tarnished. The brass is really tarnished, so probably won't be a great electrical pickup. This thing is absolutely nasty. So we're going to take this thing apart and further examine the engine from there. So I'll be right back. All right, I got the two screws off. These screws are actually all identical, which is really cool. It means that I don't have to carefully, separate the screws because they're all different sizes. Having them all be the same is really nice. So that took actually quite a bit of pressure to remove because of all the old caked on grease preventing this thing from getting removed. But there you go, and look at that. That is absolutely disgusting. All right, well, you can sort of see the worm down there that's connected to this thing here, the axle, and then so, as I said, 2 helical gears goes down to this axle, which you can see the worms inside there, and then those rotate and spin these gears. So, yeah, I'm gonna just take this entire thing apart, and yeah, we'll see from there. I was picking at the grease from this. There's a huge blob of grease in the middle of this thing, as you saw in the prior shot. And what's interesting is I thought the grease was new because it was nice and yellow. But it's completely solidified. I mean, you can see how it's like crumbly, like it's almost solid there. This entire piece was stuck inside, and it's just completely solidified grease. I can pick it up with my finger. It's like I can't even mash it down. I'm putting pressure on it, but it's still solid. So I mean, that is one issue. I thought it looks like it was probably clean, fresh grease. But this is why you cannot over grease your engines, because eventually oil does solidify, and it will dry out. And so if you put too much on it, it will cake up and really affect the drivetrain. And that's the reason you really should be not over lubing your engines. And if you do, you'll have to do periodically. You periodically have to take it apart and remove all the old stuff and push the fresh stuff in. But in my opinion, if you just put light amount of oil each time, you should be fine. And yeah, I'm just still gradually picking away at the oil. I'm gonna take all the parts out and assemble them over there before I strip everything down. So yep. Alright, everything is fully disassembled. I tried my best to remove all the grease without actually using any alcohol or any lacquer thinner, which is what I will be using to strip this engine. There's no reason to try to use liquids to actually remove the grease because there's just so much grease, and I'm going to be stripping everything anyways. So I basically just try to remove as much grease as possible using just some paper towels and some screwdrivers and whatnot, and toothpicks and whatever. But anyways, everything's now laid out. One thing I want to note is I already put the screws back into where the holes are supposed to be. This way I don't lose track of where the screws should go. This is a really useful trick if you don't want to lose all your screws and whatnot. So all the screws are screwed back into the holes, and yeah, including the one over here. And yeah, so everything's going to be stripped using lacquer thinner except for the motor and this little plastic insulation piece. The plastic insulation piece will be stripped with isopropyl alcohol because lacquer thinner will likely damage this plastic. I looked around and everything else seems to not be plastic. This looks like it's resin, and so does this gear. It seems to be made of resin instead of plastic. And the motor, for obvious reasons, will not be stripped down. So yeah, on to stripping. Alright, and after 2 hours of stripping paint and getting my hands real dirty, now these things are finally stripped. I also breathed in a lot of lacquer thinner fumes. I would not recommend you do so, but yeah, everything looks really clean now. There are a few paint spots I couldn't really get rid of, especially in the cracks and crevices, but that doesn't really matter for my purpose right now. As I said, I'm not painting it right now, and usually before repainting an engine, I always restrip the engine with some really fresh lacquer thinner. But for now, let's just reassemble this thing. So yeah, let's get to it. As I'm reassembling this thing, I'm using some files to file down any burrs or anything I see in the die casting. And as far as lubricating, I'm using light oil. I use just Bachmann Easy Light Oil. I prefer to use Libel, but I only have this currently. In the bearing areas, including the bearing where the axle sits, or the shaft sits, and also where the axle sits inside the die cast there. So right here and right there. As far as the grease, which I have, just again, more Bachmann stuff. Once I finish using the Bachmann stuff, I'm going to switch over to Libel, but the grease I put where the gear sits. So like this worm gear and the worm obviously underneath, that's where you want to use grease. And then, yeah, otherwise I only use those two lubricants. I do have some conductive oil, but that I use only in during near pickups and whatnot, but this engine doesn't really need it. But yeah, so the reconstruction is going along very smoothly. Alright, so during reassembly, I realized that this copper pickup piece, the ends, which obviously rub against the brass wheels, they're so thin that one side effectively just kind of snapped off, as you can see. And now it's no longer long enough to hit the wheel. Unfortunately, I don't have any spare copper sheet, so I'm going to use a bit of brass sheet to make a temporary pickup. Brass is not a great conductor because one, it does tarnish, and tarnished brass does not pick up power unlike copper does. Tarnished copper does pick up electricity. Brass does not, so brass is not an excellent pickup thing. However, the friction from it hitting the brass wheel should prevent tarnish. And also, I mean, we are picking up on a brass wheel after all, so, you know, if we're working already with brass, no reason not to use a brass pickup. So I'm just going to cut a sheet of this out of the brass and replace that little worn out copper piece. Alright, sometime later, and I got the base reassembled. I actually went back and polished the wheels, as you can see here. I used a Dremel with a wire wheel. Ideally, I'd use also a buffing tool, but I don't have that right now, so yeah, I'm too lazy to buy polish and also that buffing wheel, so I just used that thing and it works okay. So as you can see, the wheels are nice and shiny now. Also got the contact back in place, as you can see there. I didn't cut the perfect piece of brass. As you can see, it's a little bit lopsided, but it works for the time being. As far as the motor goes, I cleaned out the best I could of all the grease and whatnot. I didn't bother cleaning actually the motor itself, because honestly the motor can be dirty. It doesn't have to be perfect as long as it spins freely, and that is the case. So after cleaning out all the stuff, I added some light oil here and around here, this area, and then I also removed the brushes, cleaned those off, and I actually polished the commutator using, again, that same wire wheel. I also removed the little bit of dirt in between the little gaps of the commutator, in order to just clean the commutator off. And then I made sure that these were tensioned properly. These, what do you call it? These, whatever you call them. I forgot the term, but anyways, yeah, I cleaned those off, and yeah, so this thing should be ready to be reassembled. This thing is rolling really freely. There's basically no friction at all and whatsoever for this wheel right here, which is good. So now all I have to do is just reassemble this thing, make sure the motor works first, and then put this back on, and we should be good. So yeah, I'll be back. All right, before I figured I'd put the cab on, I figured I'd show a little scene of the test track. Can't have that because it's going to touch the contact leads, which is obviously a no-no. Definitely runs smoother and quieter on this direction than this direction. But still a rather good runner. Let's see the top speed. It's actually much faster than that, but I don't want it to go off the track. So yeah, pretty fast, high speed. But yeah, honestly, a rather smooth runner, just a little noisy. All right, final little thing is the couplers. So as you see, the original condition, it just came with these really long flathead screws with no couplers, or actually came with two couplers. One of them was one of these European styles, hook and loop. Another one was a dummy coupler. Obviously, those won't work on my layout, so I was test fitting some of my own KD couplers, and I realized the KD ones are a bit too wide. These are actually just wide enough, and what I did with these was, with the original plastic springs, they were too wide and too long, but I cut those off, and I just basically, it remains with a little bit of a loop. These are Athearn McHenry couplers, by the way. They're the KD 158 equivalent. And I like these actually. They're okay for especially light duty like this. And this actually fits perfectly inside the really thin slot. As you can see, again, this coupler box is a lot narrower than your standard KD coupler. So that's the reason why you can't just fit normal KDs inside. It just wouldn't fit, being so, again, narrow. But this one fit fine. However, as you can see, the screw is much thinner than the hole. So what I did was I took these screws. I took a piece of the styrene tubing, which is just happens to be wide enough to fit through this hole, like that, as you can see. And I cut a little piece off like that, and then I fitted over this screw with a little, with a little washer to prevent the coupler from just coming right out. And I'm just gonna use this to mount the two couplers together. And hopefully that should work as a coupler box thing. The coupler box being so narrow doesn't allow for the coupler to turn left and right really much at all. And so I'm honestly not concerned with the fact that the coupler has no centering spring anymore. Because again, the narrow coupler box is so narrow, so this coupler can't move really much left or right. So yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna install this and be right back. Alright, so the engine is now fully assembled. As you can see here, the couplers turned out great. Again, there's no centering spring, but this thing doesn't really get the pivot much at all. So honestly, it doesn't really affect the operation. One thing actually that's good about the fact that I use plastic couplers is that if I use die-cast couplers, it would actually make in contact with the frame, which could cause issues if this was connected to something that had also something similar, where a metal coupler is touching a metal frame, and that's no good. That's the reason why KD coupler boxes are always plastic. They never make metal ones. So the plastic coupler does eliminate the fact that anything, nothing will be in contact with the couplers. So yeah, this engine, the coupler heights are a bit high. There's nothing I can really do about that. At least not now. The coupler box is kind of jank, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. But yeah, I also didn't add any additional details. I just have the 2 little grab irons that it came with, that I assume the original owner added themselves. But yeah, so let's see how this thing runs. I have my controller right here. Understandably, the pickups is really poor because it's only 2 wheels. Surprisingly, at higher speeds, it actually runs rather smoothly. We get a couple up to the freight car here, hopefully. Oh, nope, so close. There we go. So yeah, as you can see, it's not a quiet runner, but that's kind of expected. It is actually very, very smooth though, as you can see. The pickups could be better. I mean, we are working with brass wheels here, which brass wheels do tarnish, and tarnished brass doesn't pick up power, so that's the reason why we have nickel plating on all our wheels. But that being said, it's a nice little switcher. It's kind of cute. I really like it. Yeah, so I don't really know what to do with this engine right now. I probably will replace the mechanism out entirely one day, but for now this thing's gonna do, and honestly it's not that bad of a runner. Surprisingly good. But yeah, I think this engine is actually really cool. It's a lot of crude details, as you can see. The handrails are all molded on. The bell is, well, just a little thing now. And a lot of details can be improved, but honestly, and also there's like a weird hole in the roof that apparently the original owner filled in. But honestly though, this engine it's given its time. This was made a long time ago. I think like 1960s, maybe even 50s. Really old engine, and all things said, the mechanism has lasted well throughout the years. It is fully made of brass and die cast, so it makes sense. But yeah, this engine's really nice. If you could find one for yourself, that'd be really cool. Don't expect it again to run quiet, but it will run very smoothly. But anyways, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this little restoration video. I don't usually post these really basic restorations, but I figured I might as well try something new. Yeah, so really fun little restoration project. Again, very enjoyable. Nothing was really annoying. I didn't have to deal with any cracked gears or anything like that. So yeah. Anyways, so that's it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.